This exercise is actually a series of 3 exercises, and it's called the Clam Shell, and it's fantastic for both strengthening and increasing the flexibility of the hip joint, the mobility of the hip joint, and the stability of the hip joint. And it's a fantastic exercise for anybody that has any kind of lower back pain, and it's actually a great exercise for everybody. Pretty much anybody can do it. As always, check with your doctor. It should be pain-free other than some of the pain you might experience when you're working your muscles strongly. And it's also fantastic for belly dance because of the hip mobility aspect. So enjoy. You're going to start lying on your side, making a little pillow for your head with your arm. You could also use an actual pillow. You want to avoid this position because it's not great to hold this. This is not good for your neck, so I definitely recommend this position. And then your hips are bent at about 45 degrees as well as your knees, so that ultimately your heels are directly underneath your butt. So the first thing you want to do is lift the waist a little bit so that your spine is in a straight line. So the bottom side of the waist is a little bit short and the top is lengthened, so our spine is neutral versus collapsed down like this. And you do have to use your core to do this. You also want to kind of tuck and untuck a few times. You don't want to be in a two-tuck position, and you don't want to be sticking your butt out too far. You want to be in what we call a neutral spine. So you want to feel your belly working a little bit. Your hips are stacked up right on top of the other, and I've tried to arrange my shirt so that you can see that, because we have a little bit of a tendency again to kind of hike that top hip up. So from here, we're going to start by squeezing the heels of our feet together. And when you do that, you should feel a little sensation in the back of your hip and kind of like the bottom part of your butt. And these are the muscles we're going to be working here. So you're going to keep that squeeze of the heels, and you're going to lift your knee up as high as it can go while keeping your hips stacked up, and then lower it back down. Now, the thing you want to watch out for is that there's a lot of tendency is to lift the knee and then let the hip roll backwards. So the hip is rolling away from the camera, giving the illusion that the knee is going higher, but that's actually a movement in the spine, and we want to isolate just the hip here. So you want to, again, make sure the hips stay stacked up. I like to hold my hand here, that way I'll know if my pelvis is moving. Again, squeezing the heels, knee comes up as high as it can go, and lower back down. Again, you want to feel like you're really driving this movement from the back of the hip. You want to keep a squeeze on those heels, really getting the maximum contraction of that muscle. And we're going to do about 8 to 10 here. And this is going to be number 8. We're going to hold that position. Again, double check that you're still in neutral spine, hips are stacked up. And now you're going to keep the thigh at this angle, and we're going to lift the heel to about knee height, maybe a little higher, and then lower it back down. And again, what we're trying to do here is just rotate the thigh bone in the hip socket, giving some nice motion to that hip joint. And as you come into this position, you're going to feel a little bit more in the front of the hip. Here you'll feel a little bit more in the back of the hip. Feet can just stay relaxed. Hips stacked. And again, we will do about 8 of them. And then we complete. And then there's one more movement for this series. We're going to bring our knees directly in front of our hips and our heels underneath our knees. So now there's a 90-degree angle at the hip socket and at the knee joint. And again, our tendency is to just kind of collapse in up here and relax our core. So you want to lengthen out the top side of the waist. You're going to lift the bottom side of the waist. You're going to find a neutral pelvis, not too tucked, not too untucked. So you're not sticking your butt out or tucking it under. We're right in the middle. And now we're going to work a little bit more from the outer hip. So you're going to lift your top leg up to about hip height, maybe a little bit higher, keeping the pelvis perfectly still, and then lower it back down. Again, you want to drive that movement from the back of the hip. It's helpful to put your hand there because it will encourage that muscle to fire, and you'll also feel it firing underneath your hand. Now, the thing you want to watch out for, and I recommend that you do this in front of a mirror if possible, is that your heel and your knee are at about the same height. Very common to see this happen, where your knee is lower than your heel. Less common is to see this happen where your knee is higher than your heel. Now, when you come into this position where your knee is lower than your heel, you're going to feel more work in the front of the hip than in the back of the hip, and we want to get more into the kind of those side butt muscles. So try to keep your shin really parallel to the ground and your foot and knee in alignment. And again, we'll do 8 to 10. And if you're doing these right, even though we're not doing that many reps, you should definitely feel something happening right there. And then we are going to stretch this out, and I'm going to just turn around so that you can see we're stretching the side we just worked. You're going to cross your ankle over your other knee, and then you're going to reach your hand. We kind of just made a little triangle here. We're going to reach your hand through the triangle that you made, grab onto the back of the other thigh, and then just pull towards you, and you can reach your elbow into that same thigh to press it away, and you want to feel a stretch in the back of the hip of the leg that is crossed. And just take up a nice deep breath there. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and cross knee over knee. Grab shin and other shin. Pull your hands towards you and your ankles away from each other, coming into a pretzel stretch. And now you want to feel it a little bit deeper in the outside of the hip that you're stretching. And in this case, I'm stretching the hip that is closer to the camera right now. A couple of nice deep breaths and release. So now we're going to do the other side, and so that you can see this from the back, I'm actually going to face away from you. So pardon me sticking my butt in your face, but that's what's about to happen. Okay, so we're going to lay on the side again, and remember, head is resting on your hand. Your spine is in neutral, so the bottom side of your waist is slightly lifted, top side of the waist long, heels are under your butt, about 45-degree angle at the hips, 45 at the knees. And the pelvis is rolling neither backward too far, this is more common mistake, nor forward too far. So we're stacked up, heels squeezed together. You want to start feeling that muscle contraction here. And then keeping everything else really still, lifting the knee up and lowering down. You want to feel that happening from here and lowering. Trying to keep the lower legs relaxed, really initiating from your low glutes. Doing about 8 to 12 of them. We'll be doing 8 in this video on each side, so that's 5. 3 more. Remember, the knees going as high as it can go without moving the pelvis. Last one, hold the leg there, then rotating the thigh in the hip socket. The heel comes up and it lowers back down. As the heel comes up, you'll feel a little bit more front of the hip. As it lowers, you'll feel more back of the hip. And you want to imagine that your thigh bone is just rotating on its own axis here. Making sure you maintain that nice posture. 3, 2, and 1. Relax. And then coming into the last position where your hips and your knees, hips are on knees aligned with hip, heel aligned with knee. Again, check the posture of your spine, bottom side of waist lifted, top side of waist long, not too tucked, not too arched, right in the middle. You want to feel your core. Now we're going for these muscles. Lifting the top leg to about hip height or a little higher, and lowering back down. Trying to stay as parallel as you can through your shin. And it's a good rule of thumb here. If you're looking down and you can see your foot, then adjust your leg so that you cannot see your foot. If you can see your foot above your knee, like I could right now, then your foot is too high. If you see it below your knee, then it's too low. And again, you want to feel that movement happening right from here for 3, 2, and 1. And then relax, rolling over onto your back. Crossing the ankle of the side that you're stretching over the other knee, reaching through for the other thigh, pulling it in towards you, stretching the hip of the leg you just worked, and then you can even press your elbow into that thigh to deepen the stretch. Breathing deeply. You can even rock around a little bit to move the stretch around the hip. And then cross knee over knee. Grab onto your shins, pulling your thighs towards you and your shins away from each other to deepen that stretch. A couple of nice deep breaths. And then relax. And that is the series of the clam shells.